This is a training that I'm putting on my podcast or on my YouTube channel for our listeners who are wanting to, grab a bit more of an understanding when it comes to knowing their numbers, like which numbers, what should I actually be looking for? I've got this great model called the finance ecosystem, which really takes you to a higher level when it comes to understanding your financials. It details the different types of financials and, more importantly, how we actually use them and make them really practical for business owners. Hello and welcome to the Profit and Cashflow Mastery podcast. I'm your host, Gavin Smith from the Profit Analyst, and in this podcast, I'm going to be showing you how simple, easy, and more important, how practical numbers can actually be for you as a small business owner. I have a pretty extensive finance career and background, but more importantly and more relevant to you is I'm a small business owner myself. I've built multiple businesses from startups and turnarounds through to 7 and even 8-figure plus businesses. And what I've learned along that journey is how to make numbers really simple and easy and practical and how to use them to guide you in your business strategies. And ultimately, that's what I now love doing. I love teaching other business owners how to make the numbers simple and easy so they can gain real clarity about their numbers. I love showing them how to basically identify what numbers actually matter in your business. But more importantly, I show you how to use your numbers so that you can make better decisions, which ultimately leads to better profitability, better cash flow, and growing and scaling businesses. So let's dive into it. We've talked about the fact that you need to know and use your financials in business, but specifically when it comes to which numbers you need to know, like what are the financials, I've got this great model which I refer to as the finance ecosystem. For those of you who can see it visually, you can see the model there obviously, and those who are just listening to this, you can download a copy of this model in the description. But what we're looking at here is a Venn diagram with 3 circles overlapping each other. And the way I want you to look at this model is it's essentially a map to the financials of your business. So the key takeaway is there are 3 different types of financials that we need to be across as a business owner who fully knows and understands our numbers. So the 3 different circles in accounting speak are profit and loss is the first one. And this is all about profitability. How well is your business doing at making money? The commercial side of your business. What opportunities are there to improve profitability? The second circle or the second set of numbers are what we call our balance sheet in accounting words, but this is all about our financial position. What do we own? What do we owe? How is the business positioned financially? And the third set of numbers is our cash flow. And specifically, I like to look at that and manage that through a cash flow forecast. So we've got 3 different types of numbers: profitability, financial position, and cash flow. They're all very distinct, different sets of numbers, but they do all overlap each other and they do all influence each other. Obviously, if one is doing really well, it's going to impact the others and vice versa. So we've got this model here. I always love to, when I'm talking about financials with a business owner, or if somebody has a specific question for me about a financial transaction or how their business is performing, I always love to start with this model, because what we're doing here is we're taking you to a really high level. We're taking you, pulling you right out of your business to a really high level and saying, okay, we've got 3 different types of numbers and we need to understand whatever it is we're talking about, this specific transaction, in the context of how it's going to show up for your business. How is it going to impact your profitability? How is it going to impact your financial position? And what is the impact of this from a cash flow perspective? So let me speak through each one of these circles in its own right. And I'll start by explaining what those set of numbers are, but then I'll also touch on a little bit about how my Profit and Cashflow Mastery System actually makes this set of numbers simplified and practical for you as a business owner to be able to use it. So first of all, let's take a look at the profitability circle. This is the one that most business owners are familiar with. This is the profit, is the business making money, yes or no? So at the center of this circle or this set of numbers, what's it all about is profitability. And that's what we're aiming for in business. If you're not making profit, you're not going to be around a business for very long. So it really is the name of the game as a business owner to be making profit. The key thing I want people to understand when they're looking at profitability is profit, which we're all chasing, is just the outcome of when you manage the 2 numbers which come before it, which are the income and the expenses. So as a simple formula, it's income minus expenses equals profit. Now, I'm well aware that the profit first thing is to switch this formula around and say it's income less your profit equals your expenses. But as a business owner, you can't just go and make profit. It's about balancing income and expenses and getting the balance of those 2 right to make sure that you do have profit there at the end of the day. So the reason I like to always point out to people that profit is a formula, because we're all chasing profit. We all want profit. That's what we're trying to make. But to be able to do it, we need to manage the 2 things in front of it. And so this is where we start to see what are your options as a business owner. And at a really high level, when you understand this basic formula, you've got 2 options to play with here. You can either increase the income or decrease the expenses, and that is going to result in more profit for you in your business. Okay, so that's the basic premise of what the P&L is all about. Understanding your income and expenses for profitability. How I teach people to use that, or how do we make it simplified and practical for business owners in our Profit and Cashflow Mastery program. We've got to draw the dots between that basic formula for making profit and the P&L, which most people look at when it comes to understanding profit. So by P&L, I'm referring to the long, boring TMI financial statement that you typically get from your bookkeeper or your accountant, or you can just go and get out of your finance system. The problem with the P&L for most people, there's way too much information there. It's way too long. It doesn't have great context for certain numbers. It's in alphabetical order. It's not structured in a way that it's really simple and easy for you to use. So the first step we do is we want to take that long TMI P&L and break it down into a much shorter list of categories. In particular, I'm only talking about 5 numbers here, which I refer to as the business driver numbers. I'll touch on these numbers in another episode. The reason it's these 5 numbers is because they basically represent the key drivers that make any business work from a profit perspective. And the reason we need to look at them as 5 separate buckets is because there are different strategies or methodologies that you'll pursue with each one of those numbers to be able to maximize your profit. So step 1, simplify your long boring P&L down into the business drivers. And then from here, we want to connect those simplified numbers across to the profit formula. However, when I look at a business's profit formula, I don't just look at income and expenses. We want to dig a little bit deeper on that. And so, for example, we take income and we break that down into its 2 parts, which is pricing strategies, what are we charging, and volume. Number of customers, number of members, number of deals, whatever it is in your industry. But the point is we're seeing price and volume, and we're realizing we now have commercial options to play with here to increase income. So if you want more income, you've actually got real world options. Can we play with pricing, or do we pursue strategies to get more customers, more sales happening? Likewise, on the expense side, we want to dig a little deeper on the expenses, and we want to see which expenses are what we refer to as variable costs, ones which are going to move up and down in relation to income, i.e. your income doubles, those costs will double, and which costs are the fixed costs of the business, things which don't move. And so once you're looking at this level of profit formula, this level where you're actually seeing the different numbers within your business, what drives your profit commercially, specifically with your simplified numbers plugged into that formula, all of a sudden, when it comes to making profit, that process becomes a heck of a lot easier because you now know what are your key numbers? What are the key KPIs that drive your profitability? And you can look at each one of those numbers as an opportunity. You know, how much effort do I need to put in for that to ultimately move my profit? And this is where you can find the 2 or 3 things that actually really matter in your business and what you should focus on to move profit. So simple recap of that. One of the key sets of numbers in business is your profitability. And my process for making that really useful and practical for a business owner, stop looking at your long, boring TMI P&L, break it down into a handful of key numbers, the business drivers, and then look at how those business drivers interact together in a formula which drives profit in your business. And you'll find what are the key numbers, the key levers that you can focus on to boost your profitability. If you're a business owner who is struggling to see results, or you're overwhelmed by the numbers side of your business, we can help. Book in a call with one of my team members using the link in the description, and let's get your business thriving without the overwhelm. Okay, so let's move on then to the next circle on here, which is our balance sheet, second set of numbers. Now, the thing about the balance sheet is it is often misunderstood, and it definitely doesn't get any love. It's generally ignored by 95% of business owners out there, typically because when you look at one, it doesn't make any sense. It's filled full of accounting jargon. It's kind of something that you just leave to your accountant to sort out at the end of the year. However, there's actually real value in you being able to read your balance sheet and understand exactly what it's saying, because at the end of the day, it's telling you what is your financial position. And this ultimately means what kind of finance resources do I have in my business that I can either 1, take out as a business owner, or 2, put to good use to be able to help grow and scale my business. So when we look at a balance sheet, the simplest way or analogy that I like people to imagine so that the balance sheet becomes simple and practical and we understand what it actually does for us is, instead of thinking about a business, think about a house for a moment. Imagine you own a $1 million house. That's something you own, but you have a loan against it, a mortgage from the bank of $800K. In that situation, you have equity of $200,000. You're the house owner. You don't own the whole house because obviously the bank has a mortgage against it. But the difference between the two is your equity, your net worth, your capital, what you've got to play with. This is essentially, that simple formula of what do I own minus what I owe, what's mine, what do I actually have. That's what a balance sheet is doing for you with your business. Except instead of looking at the assets, the part you own, and just seeing a house, in business, the assets that you own are like the cash in the bank, the receivables, clients who you've sent invoices to who owe you money. If you have it, it's inventory and stock. It's the equipment that you've invested into, the fit outs that you've made. It's all the things that you own as a business owner. And then when we look at the liability side, it's not just a mortgage like we have in the house example. Instead, in business, the things that we owe money to are our bills, the suppliers, the credit bills we need to pay. It's our team liabilities if we've got team, like their superannuation, their leaves. Tax is a huge one here. This is where your BAS sits, your PAYG, your income tax. Also, it's finance. So if we've got credit cards or loans or anything like that, that's all sitting there in the bundle as well. So just like the house example, what do we own? Cash, receivables, equipment, etc. What do we owe? Bills, team, liabilities, tax, credit cards. One minus the other is giving us our net position. What is our financial position in this business? What do we have in the way of free resources which we can take out of the business or go and put to good use within the business? It's essentially summarizing our financial position on any given day and telling us how we're situated. And just like how we could simplify the P&L down into its basic numbers so that we could actually use them, in the Profit and Cashflow Mastery program, we do the same thing here as well. Instead of looking at the typical long, boring TMI balance sheet that comes to you from your bookkeeper or accountant or what you get out of zero, we have a process to simplify this down just to 4 key numbers. And it's these 4 numbers that enable you to not only understand your financial position really quickly, because it's just 4 numbers, but you can really clearly see, where is my profit going? Every time I make profit and that's going into my balance sheet, what's actually happening to the profit? Where is it? Is it cash or is it going somewhere else in the business? Let's jump on to the third set of numbers on here. So now we're talking about cash flow. And the thing about cash flow is it's often a bit of a challenge for many business owners where they tend to think cash flow and profit should be the same thing. If I'm making profit, where's my cash? Why don't I have cash in the business? And we need to realize that cash in the bank and our cash flow is very different from our profit for a number of reasons. There's kind of 3 key reasons, which I'll outline now. So first of all is there's timing differences. So ultimately, yes, the profit you make in your business should end up as cash in the bank, as your profit. However, if you're just to run down your P&L and write next to each item on there, when the money comes in or out of your bank account, you can see that real disconnect between the timing differences of when you're actually making the profit and when it lands as cash in the bank. And there's a whole other episode where I've talked about this previously, the timing differences between the two of them. So we've got timing lags as one of the differences. The other key area which impacts your cash flow is the transactions which are occurring outside of the trading nature of your business. So they don't appear on the P&L, but they do show up within your balance sheet. So what I'm talking about here, for example, is when you're paying a loan. When you have a loan on your balance sheet, that's money you owe to somebody else. When you have to make a loan repayment, money comes out of your bank account and pays down the loan. That's not a trading transaction, so it doesn't appear in your P&L. So when you're seeing the profit, it's not including this transaction. But because this is money coming out of your bank account, ultimately that's showing up down here as well in your cash flow. And this can often be an area where it tricks many business owners where they think I'm making profit, but I don't see it in my bank account. And what they don't realize is they've started their business or utilized loans along the way. They're paying down those loans on the balance sheet. But because those payments don't show up in the P&L, they don't understand why I'm making the profit. I don't see it in the bank account. But what's happening is the money is from the profit isn't going into their bank account. Instead, it's going to the bank or whoever they've got the loan from to pay that down. Okay, the other key thing about cash flow and why I like to look at it as its own set of numbers and why I give it a whole circle in the finance ecosystem model here is cash flow is a vitally important metric that you need to be across as a business owner. It's literally why my program is called Profit and Cashflow. They're 2 very separate numbers and we need to be across both of them to be successful in business. But the thing that really catches many business owners out is that they find their cash flow, or in particular their bank balance, to be an absolute roller coaster ride. One week they're sitting pretty, there's a lot of cash in the bank, they're thinking they're a business genius. The very next week we're completely out of money and we're stressed and we think we're a failure and we don't know what's going on in business. And it's this complete roller coaster ride for people to be on. And there's a really good reason why this is and what drives this roller coaster ride and why that is different from P&L. What I want you to do to explain why it's such an up or down ride when it comes to cash is let's just have a look at the different timing nature and cycles of transactions that take place within your bank account. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to draw a little X on the page. If you're listening along, you just have to imagine this. But what I'm doing is saying there's transactions which occur every week that come out of your bank account. So I'm drawing a little X to represent, each X represents 1 week's worth of transactions. Next row down, there's also transactions that happen on a fortnightly basis. Maybe your wages are paid on a fortnightly basis. So every second week, I'm going to draw a little X here, which represents transactions that happen fortnightly. Then we have transactions which occur monthly. Things like the rent, for example, something that you pay once a month. So every 4 weeks, I'm just going to draw a little X here. And then the final set, just to complete this, is we'll say we have quarterly transactions. Things like your BAS statements or the quarterly super bill that might be due. So we'll just draw an X here for something once a quarter. And what you can see here is the different overlay of these different cycles playing out, weekly, fortnightly, monthly, etc. is you can just imagine what's happening to the bank balance because of these different transactions. And it's these different cycles of money coming in and out of your bank account, which is really driving the up and down nature of your bank account, much more so than how your business is actually performing from a profitability perspective. And it's this roller coaster ride which often tricks and traps many business owners, particularly if they don't know how to understand or don't know how to read their P&L and the balance sheet. And instead, they're just focusing on the bank account as an indicator of how well is my business performing. If that's the case, we're absolutely on an unnecessary roller coaster ride of emotions. You know, the bank account looks good and we think we're a business genius. Then it's the next thing, the bank account is really low and we're like quite stressed, you know, what's happened to my business? So it's like this, oh, business is great, business is bad, business is great, business is terrible. Oh no, business is really good. It's a complete up and down roller coaster ride, which unfortunately traps many business owners. There's one real positive though about being these different cycles that are going on within your cash flow. And what that is that we can actually come along relatively easily, take a look at your bank account and the different cycles and patterns and how that's playing out. And then it's actually really quite easy to be able to just extrapolate all of those different cycles into the future. And what this enables you to do is create this is what we call a cash flow forecast, where we can automatically see a really good estimate of what your bank balance is going to be on any given week, well off into the future. And this is literally the first thing we do for anybody who comes in and joins our coaching program or any business I'm ever working with. I want to take a look at the cash flow forecast. I want to see what are the highs and in particular, what are the lows in our cash flow in the coming weeks, because as a business owner, this is one of the key risk points in business. You know, how close are we to running out of cash? Or does the business have plenty of cash and we don't need to worry about it? But it's one of the first things I really want to find out straight away when I work with anybody. And it's the first thing we do in our program is to put a cash flow forecast in place for people. And I know how much of an impact this makes for so many of the business owners who come and join us, because they've been carrying around this stress of the cash flow in their mind. They're often doing that mental arithmetic of this is how much money's in the bank. This person owes me. This person owes me. I'm going to get paid this, but I've got to pay wages and the bills this week. And we're doing this like mental arithmetic of working out our cash flow and are we going to be okay to get through the low points? And the beauty of having a cash flow forecast down on a page is you can really simply and easily see all those numbers mapped out for you. You can see the highs and lows and you can see what's driving it. And when you're not having to do the calculations mentally, you can actually see it. It means you're freed up to focus on the creativity element or the problem solving element of how am I going to make sure my cash flow is okay. You can see the key levers and what you need to focus on to make sure it happens. The simple way of thinking about cash flow is, as I've talked about here, everybody's bank account, doesn't matter what your business is a roller coaster ride. I own Pilates studios where the income is on a membership basis and there's a very steady weekly flow of cash coming into the business. It's literally the same money every week coming into the business. It's very easy to predict, a very predictable cash flow because all the members are on memberships that are on direct debit, so we can see it coming in. Even so, the bank balance is still an absolute roller coaster ride. Some weeks it's low as 20K. At other points during the quarter, it'll be as high as 100K. And this is where the cycle flows in this business, even though the money coming in every week is very much the same. So what we're doing here with the cash flow is I like people just to imagine there's kind of this line off into the future for your business, which we could call it like the death line for a lack of a better word. It's the point where the business runs out of money and you're in a lot of trouble because you can't pay for things. All we're doing with cash flow forecasting is seeing the highs and lows and seeing, are we close to the death line or are we actually fine? There's enough cash flow in this business that we don't need to worry about running out of cash. The reason I want to do that is one, we want to see if we're safe straight away, or do we need to actually drill into it and focus on how we can improve the cash flow and make sure we avoid the danger points. Highlighting it as a separate circle here and why I deal with it first is because at the end of the day, it is not cash flow and cash flow management which is going to make you an amazing business. It's the profitability circle, which we touched on first. In particular, how do we make profit and how do we boost our profitability, which is really going to make you successful in business. Because first of all, you have to be making profit to stick around in business. But if we can work out how to grow and scale your profit and dial that up, ultimately, it's going to make your cash flow better. It's going to make you wealthier on your balance sheet. And it's really profitability and being able to how to master how to make profit in your business and knowing what the options and levers are for you to push and pull on to always be maximizing the profit along your journey. That's the real gold in this. And that's what the real gold in my program, Profit and Cashflow Mastery. It's the cash flow side of it. It's just making sure we're safe when it comes to cash flow. But you're not going to make and grow and scale your profit through cash flow management. This is another shortcoming of Profit First, is it focuses on the bank accounts and pushing money around different bank accounts as a way to make profit. And we're just missing so many opportunities when we don't focus on the P&L data, how to simplify that, how to identify the profit levers and maximize those levers to be able to make profit. Cash flow is merely just about managing the cash as one of the resources within business to make sure we're safe at any point in time. So to pull back from the detail here, the real takeaway that I want people to understand, and in particular, go and grab a copy of this model and download it from the descriptions there and look at this as a map to financials in your business. The key takeaway is there are 3 different types of financials: P&L for understanding profitability and how do we maximize profitability, balance sheet for understanding our financial position, knowing what resources we've got within this business and how are we going with building our wealth, and then cash flow, which is purely just about managing the cash resource really well to make sure we're safe at any point in time in our business. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Profit and Cashflow Mastery. If this episode helped you gain clarity with your numbers, then please make sure you give us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. And if you want to stay connected, make sure you give us a follow on the socials at The Profit Analyst.